It was a hopeful run in Indianapolis there for the Buckeyes, but not quite last weekend. We will hear a little bit from Steve in a few minutes. We're back to Football Focus here at the Voice of College Football, of course, as we are 24/7, 365. We welcome everyone in here. Buckeyes live for a 204th time. If my math is right, that's about 4 years, folks, that we've been delivering this to you each and every week. We hope you appreciate it. Leave those comments and questions in the live chat. Consider the super chat as well as we bring in the very best, including, of course, Steve Hillwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. We appreciate Steve not just being here, but posting these shows at Bucknuts. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
So at this point last week, you were headed out, Big Ten tournament, of course, and not very hopeful. Nobody could blame you. And I got to say, I got a little excited over the weekend. Wins over Wisconsin, Michigan State, Iowa was a big one, of course, and then played a really good first half against Purdue before the wheels came off. And, of course, they were missing two prominent players as well.
Yeah, no doubt. What a crazy weekend that was for Ohio State. Just had such a rough season all the way through, and for finally to put it together in the absolute 11th hour. I mean, where they needed to win 5 games in 5 days to get to the NCAA tournament, and they somehow pulled it together. I don't know how they did it, but it was definitely a fun run for Ohio State to win those games in Chicago. As you said, started with Wisconsin, then Iowa, then Michigan State, a team that had beaten them twice. And, it was just kind of, what's the word to put for it? It was kind of inspirational watching the team kind of come together. Makes you wonder, had they been able to figure all that out, a few weeks earlier, then maybe they would have had a chance in going on to March Madness this year, a realistic chance. But ultimately, they ran into to some tough roadblocks there with Purdue and the big guy Zach Edey. Too much for Ohio State to overcome. I think he had 32 points and 14 rebounds in that game against Ohio State, 80-66. The Buckeyes into the year 16-19, and yet there's hope for next year with the nucleus of Zed Key, that center who was out a while, Bruce Thornton, Felix Okpara, Roddy Gale, those guys back as freshmen, going to be sophomores. There were rumors that Chris Holtman was looking at Notre Dame, but we can tell you he kind of debunked those and rebuffed those rumors on Tuesday, and is committed to trying to put a winner on the court at Ohio State next year. So future's bright at Ohio State. One thing up in the air, Bryce Sensabaugh, what his status is going to be. He missed the last 2 games in Chicago due to a knee injury. And is he going to follow through and declare for the NFL or the NBA draft? And CBS Sports, I just looked it up, has him, Gary Parrish has him number 11 overall in the NBA draft, going to his hometown Orlando Magic. So that would be something if that really happens. But a lot of time for all that stuff to unfold. And the silly season now with transfers and spring recruiting and everything else that's going to take place. But that kind of puts a bow just as we're getting into March Madness. And of course, I work for 24/7 Sports and CBS, and March Madness is something that we're always pushing at our network, obviously, since CBS carries a lot of the games. But I'm going to actually take part in some of it. I'm going to be at Nationwide Arena probably on Friday to watch Michigan State here in Columbus. Purdue will play in the evening session. I'm not sure I'm going to stick around for that. And then on Saturday, the Ohio State women are a 3 seed in one of the regions, and they will play James Madison Saturday. That game's on ESPN2. And the winner of that game will go on to play North Carolina, Purdue, or St. John's, depending on a first 4 matchup there. The winner of that first round game, that'll be on Monday sometime. So there is a little smidgen of March Madness for Ohio State, and that should be a Sweet 16 team as well for the Ohio State women's program. And fans can go out and watch those games if they want to get the fever. Go out to Value City Arena Saturday and Monday to attend that game.
Folks, we get Steve here for the next 50 or 60 minutes. Leave those comments and questions in the live chat. Understand that we do this each and every week, typically on Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, but sometimes we've got to move that time. Therefore, we ask that you would subscribe right here at the Voice of College Football, Ohio State, and hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live and drop new content as well. Steve, I'm going to size up the offseason in kind of a strange way. And the only reason I think I can put my finger on why there seem to be such conflicting views about where this team, where this program is, and where they should land in 2023 is because for so long, they have been the odds-on favorite to win the Big Ten. This has been going on for a decade plus that they have been the favorite. And if you take it and skip the Luke Fickell year, take it deep into the Tressel era, and you've got the same thing. But this is a team that is still going to be ranked most likely in the top 4 in the nation to start the season. They have the most talented team in the conference. That's not even debatable if you believe the recruiting rankings, which I certainly do. They're not flawless, but they have proven to be accurate, overall accurate for years and years and years. On the other hand, there's this malaise of Michigan hangover. Georgia, you can draw whether you're a cup half empty, half full. You can either draw the optimism from playing with the best team in the country down to the wire and outplaying them most of the game. And then you can draw the skepticism of didn't get it done. There's just this conflicting convergence of storylines and narratives concerning this team because the expectations are so lofty as to whether they can get it done this year.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I think that you obviously there's some doubt that comes into it sometimes, and what can you say? I mean, the last 2 years have been the last 2 years. Is that going to portend what's going to happen in 2023? We don't know. And, as you said, they've got the most talented team, and you have to go out and prove it. You've got to go out and play great defense, and you got to go out and put 35, 40 points on the board to win those big-time games. It seems that all the important games now have become shootouts. And that's just the way it is. And you've got to be able to put up 35 or 40 points in those big games. And so, we lay a lot of this at the foot of the defense that's let Ohio State down. And it has, but, there have been times as well where the offense has come up a little bit short as well. So, again, until you get into those weeks and those games, it's impossible to know. Michigan's going to have a stacked team again this year. They've got a good quarterback, got one of the best running backs in college football, Blake Corum, coming back. Probably some good pieces on their defense returning. So I'm of a mind to believe that it's going to work out. It's going to come together. It's just in that moment where they absolutely have to win that game to win the Big Ten, to beat Michigan, to go on to the playoff. Is it going to all come together? And we won't know that. We just don't know that. It's impossible to predict it. You think it's going to come together, but until it does, it hasn't. So, I don't know what to say. I mean, we can, we bat this back and forth every week. Are they going to beat Michigan? I don't know.
Nobody
honestly,
knows.
you don't know. I mean, the last 2 years say they're in for a hell of a fight because Michigan now has the belief that it doesn't matter who Ohio State recruits. They can beat Ohio State. So they haven't felt that way in over 20 years on a consistent basis. So to me, Ohio State's kind of built a bit of a monster here with Michigan. And now, they're going to have to take that monster down and regain control of that rivalry. And that's easier said than done.
Sounds similar, Steve, to what I say just about every day on here concerning conference realignment and expansion when people want to know what's going to happen. And I say, I can lay out all sorts of factors, scenarios. I can tell you and give you what I think is pretty knowledgeable information and insight into the status of the football brands, the money, the market size of the TV markets, and all of that. We can put it all together and draw out scenarios. But if anybody out there says that they know what is going to happen, I highly doubt that. Bricky loves Ohio State. We're going to play a little inside baseball here because Bricky's taking us down this lane and says, I like Steve. He will ask the head coach questions. Nobody else will. Thank you. So, Steve, we see this, and the next time we'll see it on a big scale. We're, of course, going to see it during the spring practices with Ryan Day and the various coaches that hit the podium, the coordinators. You ask, get your question or two, but then we'll see you on the Big Ten Media Days coming up in Chicago. So when you go into a situation like that, when you're most likely only going to get one question, do you have that predetermined? Have you played off of what maybe the coach has said earlier in the news conference and something has piqued your interest? I'm sure it's some kind of combination.
Yeah, I think when you get to the Big Ten Media Days, which have been moved to Indianapolis most years now because they're doing it at the Lucas Oil Stadium, you kind of go into it with 3 or 4 ideas that you want the coach to clarify just in that setting before the start of preseason practice, kind of a tone setting type situation to kind of, provide some depth or some idea of where things are headed at the beginning of preseason camp. And it could be a position clarification. It could be just general thoughts about the team, areas that they need to improve their performance on the previous season. And of course, Ryan Day has fielded a lot of defensive questions because that's where most of the issues have been. I think they did a briefing on February the 1st, which was the traditional National Signing Day, even though they didn't add anybody. And I asked a question that day just about the whole philosophy that Jim Knowles had said, we're going to give up some big hits here and there with this style of defense. And Ryan Day kind of ran counter to that, saying, no, that's not acceptable. We can't even give up one big hit. We don't want to give up one big hit, and gambling with the idea that it's okay to give up one big hit, here or there is okay. No, he doesn't want to go down that path. So I thought that was an interesting dichotomy that you had the coordinator of the belief that, I can gamble with Coach Day's chips here a little bit and, get beat for a long touchdown by Michigan and get beat for a long touchdown by Georgia. And it's all going to come out in the wash. We're still going to win those games. Well, lo and behold, alas, you did not win those games. So I think that that's kind of a reckoning or an enlightenment that needed to be kind of brought out there that at least for people who follow this closely, that's not acceptable. And I don't think anybody ever thought it was. And, it ended up being the thing that brought them down in the end. And so the fervent hope is that with an improved pass rush, with juniors and seniors playing the defensive tackle and defensive end positions, and with 2 studs at linebacker, Tommy Eichenberg and Steele Chambers, and an overall improvement of talent in the secondary with the Syracuse transfer Jahad Carter at safety, Davison Igbenison from Ole Miss at corner, and he's a big corner. It looked good the first day. Denzel Burke and Jordan Hancock improved and healthy at the other corner position. Lathan Ransom returning with some experience at safety. And then possibly Sonny Styles, Kai Stokes, Cameron Martinez, Court Williams, whoever it may be at the other safety position, that it's going to be an improved defense. And I don't really see a weak link in that defense. And moreover, Igbenison is a sophomore. Most of these guys will be in their junior or senior year, with many of them playing to jump off to the NFL. I think Chambers, Eichenberg, uh, Tui Maloau, Sawyer, some of those interior guys, Tyleek Williams, um, Ty Hamilton, and then Carter and Ransom, Burke, could all be playing for their NFL status. That's 8 guys playing to get to the NFL on defense that want to play great football, who are veterans who've played a lot of football. And so that portends to me, I've used portends twice now in the course of our show. That brings about to me a situation where you have a veteran defense that has taken its lumps the last couple of years in the big games, has felt that pain of losing those big games, has been on the firing line, has been the reason for losing those big games. And those guys don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to experience that anymore. And individually, they need to play so that they can make millions and millions of dollars playing in the NFL. The money that they are passing around in free agency right now, Mark, in the NFL, I mean, you have to wait out that first contract 4 or 5 years as an indentured servant for 4 or 5 years because of the collective bargaining agreement. But once you get past that first contract and you prove yourself, my goodness, Draymond Jones is going to make $40 million a year? Is that what he's going to make? Is that what that read? Is 132 million for 3 years or 4 years or something?
I'll look that up. I didn't see the numbers. I just knew that he had signed a big contract.
Look up Draymond Jones' contract. I think he's going, to Seattle? I mean, this is a guy. I mean, this wasn't a Bosa or a Chase Young. He was like a 7 out of 10. If those guys were a 9 out of 10, he was a 7 or 8 out of 10 at Ohio State. And this guy is now going to make more than $30 million a year rushing the passer in the National Football League. So these guys at Ohio State see what's out there. They see that the potential is out there to make that kind of money. And it starts with how they perform this coming season at Ohio State. And if they can be all Big Ten, All-American type players, at Ohio, if Ohio State has 2 All-Americans on defense and 3 or 4 all Big Ten first-team guys on defense, they will be in the Final Four. They will play for the national championship. Mark it down. But if they don't have anybody who steps up and answers the challenge and answers the call and has double-digit sacks or 5 interceptions or 100 tackles or 20 tackles for loss, all those benchmark things that you see, a Will Anderson or, those type players across the board, a Bosa, those type guys in years past, a Chase Young, have to change games. If they don't have those kind of seasons, then this thing as a collective group, a unit, will not reach its full potential. And they will lose a game somewhere along the line, and they will not make it to the national championship game. I think this team has the potential to be there in the end, but they got to put it together. So that to me, some of the money that's being thrown around right now is kind of crazy.
According to a few different sites, the total contract package for 3 years is $51 million. That's what I'm looking at. $20 million signing bonus.
Okay. I had him confused with Lamar Jackson. I'm Lamar Jackson's number he turned down supposedly was 132, and I was sitting there watching that. I apologize for getting that confused, but still, that is $15 to $20 million a year for Draymond Jones, and he's a good player. He was a good player at Ohio State, but I don't think he's ever been regarded as one of the all-time greats. So I think that's eye-opening type money, and I do apologize for getting those confused. And that was obviously a complete mistake on my part. I was sitting at lunch yesterday, and it came across that Lamar Jackson turned down $132 million over 3 years. So I got those confused. But yeah, my old brain not functioning on all synapses today.
Well, I had somewhat lost track of Draymond Jones. I knew that he was in the league. I knew that he was a starter, knew that he was playing, knew that he had gotten a little bit lost in Denver, where nobody's paying too much attention to the Broncos these days because they've been so bad for quite a long time now. But I did hear that he had an exceptional season for Denver this past year, led them in sacks and tackles for loss and so forth. And so he's cashing in on that payday. The comment on the screen plays into what you just said. Jim Knowles is going to rue the day that he said, that we've got 5 or 6 big plays baked into this defense. And that's just kind of the way it is. That's become his calling card of sorts, not for him personally, but for the fan base, kind of throwing that back in his face.
Yeah. He also did a press conference last Tuesday, a week ago yesterday. And it was pretty cordial, I think, for about the first 10 or 15 minutes. And then Bill Rabinowitz from the Columbus Dispatch brought up, the 2 losses, Michigan and whoever it was, they played Georgia in the playoff. And Jim Knowles kind of smiled and said, I figured this was coming. You had to bring that up. We were going along so great until you brought that up. And of course, he smiled a little bit, and he knows full well that what happened wasn't acceptable. I think he's on a 3-year contract, I believe, is what we ascertained as the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. So he's got a little bit of job security, and certainly making top of class money to be a defensive coordinator and assistant coach at Ohio State. And now he's got to back that up, and he's got to earn that money. And as I said, there's no reason to believe why they can't do it. When you look at it individually and collectively, there have been upgrades. And as we saw from the year 2021 to 2022, guys get older, bigger, stronger, smarter, faster. They play better. And the final result was better, at least on the field. I thought overall it was better in many respects season long from the year before. They slammed the door on the 7 or 8 really, really bad offenses that they played. The Penn State game and the Maryland game, they did give up a few points. They did give up a few plays, and those were kind of the warning sign for what was to come. Obviously, against Michigan with the 5 long touchdowns in that game, and then certainly the Georgia game where they just, when the game was on the line, they could not get the stops they needed to get off the field. So, and Georgia was able to pull it out late. So, to me, it's going to be better. How much better? We can't say. We don't know. It's got to be put on the field. And I think obviously the game at Notre Dame will be telltale. They brought in a great quarterback from Wake Forest to take over that offense. And we'll see if Ohio State's got what it takes to hold down what could be a pretty good Notre Dame offense in 2023.
Yakov, appreciate you being here, man. Always good to see Yakov in the live chat. Appreciate the contribution as well. Says Jack Sawyer's NFL future is J.J. Watt inside type. I would have never made that connection, but that's where Yakov is going. J.J. Watt, but inside. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with that, because I think Jack on his body, there may be a limit to how much he can carry. So, and still be an effective athletic defensive lineman. I've had a little bit of an eye problem and irritation. So if I'm rubbing my eyes, that's what it's all about. So, yeah. I'm not sure I necessarily agree with Yakov. I do think that Jack, with a great year, can have some NFL value, no doubt.
Well, we hope your eye's better. How long's that been going on?
I think it's just allergies more than anything, and nothing serious, just irritation more than anything.
Ryan Dawes, appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the contribution. Ryan cannot stay, but wanted to leave a comment. Go Buckeyes. There it is. Thank you, Ryan, for that contribution. Appreciate that.
Awesome. Great job, Ryan.
There's a name that pops up regardless of what show I'm doing. and the name is Brian Hartline. Even if there is no connection in the conversation to Ohio State when it comes to recruiting, this guy has just become such a superstar, and you wonder where that magic combination is of his ability to recruit, how much is the school recruiting itself, which obviously has been going on for decades. So it's not all him. He didn't show up at Western Kentucky and start pulling in 5-star wide receivers. So it's a combination of, and then his actual coaching skill, because don't forget, folks, this guy, tossed up 1,000-yard seasons in the NFL. To my surprise at the time, I never thought that he was going to turn out to be the kind of player that he turned out to be in the NFL, and made a smart decision to opt for the NFL and not stick around with a Terrell Pryor offense for an extra year at Ohio State. And it really paid off for him personally, but he has just turned into a superstar of a coach.
Yeah, I think that this guy, straight out of Central Casting, I think, I go back a long ways with him. I believe Canton Glen Oak is where he came from. And he was a state track meet hurdler. He had, as I recall, a knee injury in high school that limited him maybe his senior year. But he came in and showed up at Ohio State and really was an outstanding player pretty quickly in his Ohio State career. As you said, left Ohio State a year early to go to the NFL. He and Brian Robisky were kind of there as the wide receivers after that whole group of Santonio Holmes, Ted Ginn Jr., and Anthony Gonzalez were kind of done in 05, 06. They were kind of the next wave, and they got back to the national championship game with those two guys as the starting wide receivers against LSU. And so it didn't surprise me that he was a good NFL player, because this is a guy, tremendous athlete, as I said, a track athlete. So he had, some innate skills that allowed him to transcend some things athletically that, maybe others couldn't do in his situation. And just a bright guy. And he took coaching extremely well and was a technician, and he's been a tremendous teacher of the receiver position. And now he's going to have that same impact on the entire offense. And to me, I think that he's a self-made guy. He's a guy that goes to work every day, puts in his 8, 10, 12 hours, and has earned everything he's ever gotten his entire life. It was never just handed to him. He's got a personality for days, a guy that, could sell ice cubes to Eskimos, as the old saying goes. And he has just done a bang up job. I mean, you think about the class that he recruited a few years ago, 3 years ago, Smith Najigba, Fleming, who were both, Fleming was like one of the top overall players in the country, top wide receiver, and he's now starting to come into his own, going into his fourth year at Ohio State. Smith Najigba is going to be a high first round pick. Then he also had Mookie Cooper and Jamison Williams in that class, I believe. And the way it's all worked out, it to me, you think about it, and then fast forward to this year, where he's got Rogers, Carnell Tate, and Brandon Ennis, 3 more national top 100 wide receivers. I mean, it's just been a place that has attracted the best of the best at the wide receiver position. And, he deserves a little bit of credit for picking up the guys that Zach Smith had started out, Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin, KJ Hill, all those guys, and putting them all in the NFL as well, finishing them off, so to speak, their last year or two at Ohio State. Zach certainly does deserve the credit for getting them started on their college careers and beginning their maturation. But that's kind of where the legend began with Hartline, as he stepped right in and there was no slippage, in terms of coaching the wide receivers. And they had all Big Ten guys every year. And it's just been, an embarrassment of riches, and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and so on and so forth. So, I just look at it that, again, this is a guy that deserves all the credit in the world, deserved this promotion to be the offensive coordinator, is one of the best recruiters I've seen in my nearly 30 years of covering this. And, I don't know what else there is to say other than I think you have to be very excited to see where this leads in the next 5 or 10 years. I was asked in my chat, let's say this happens. Ohio State wins 2 national championships in the next 5 years under Ryan Day, and he gets the itch to go off as Saban did midstream and become an NFL coach. And now there's an opening at Ohio State. And in this time, Luke Fickell has won, if they keep divisions, that's kind of a big if, first of all, won his division and gotten to the championship game and won 10 games at Wisconsin a few times and won some bowl games and done this and done that? Or do you elevate Hartline, who will now by that point have close to 10 years of college coaching experience, none as a head coach? What do you do? And I said unequivocally, you elevate Hartline, because you aren't throwing Hartline overboard just so Luke Fickell can have a nice homecoming, all things being equal. Hartline will, at that point, if you're telling me they've won 2 national championships with Hartline calling the offense, I ain't changing that formula, bud. I'm sorry to tell you. Now, I like Fickell. I think Fickell's going to do a great job at Wisconsin. And, this year's game at Wisconsin is one that could be a referendum game for Luke Fickell in his first year at Wisconsin. I mean, it could be the game that makes him $100 million coach, to be honest with you. I mean, sets him up for life if he's able to upset Ohio State in his first year at Wisconsin. They could give him a lifetime contract or something, if he's able to do that and put them in a position to win a Big Ten, because that's something they haven't done in what now, a decade. So they're dying to win again at Wisconsin, and he's the guy that's going to give them the best chance, I think, to do that. But one other interesting thing about that question mark, the guy on my chat surmises Ohio State's going to win 2 national championships in the next 5 years. And I said, again, I always bring this up like the guy when they're about to kill Axel Foley in what is it, Beverly Hills Cop, and he says, I'm going to come back and I'm going to get you, whatever, Victor Maitland. He said that'd be a neat trick, because they're going to kill Axel Foley. He's about to be killed. That'd be a neat trick, because Ohio State's won exactly 2 national championships in my lifetime, and I'm 55 years old. So to win 2 in the next 5 years seems a little bit ambitious, but hey, let's go with it. What the hell? We're just spitballing on the internet today. It's 11:36 on March 15th. So, what the heck? Let's just go with it.
Yeah, my ears perked up when you said 2 in 5 years, and I
2
thought
in
that
5 years, Mark. Yeah.
I thought that doesn't sound like Steve, because
just the old 2 in 5 years thing.
2 in 5 years. That's it? Just 2. Well, Georgia won 2 in a row. The program's capable of doing it, but that's mighty aggressive. Yes, that's mighty aggressive. A national championship they are tough to come by. Very difficult to come by. It's just me. Tim wants to see how the wide receiver room stacks up. And before I cut you loose here, Steve, what you were talking about with Brian Hartline and just the abundance of riches that's beyond imaginable at any position in college football. I see this photo that gets thrown around social media, and I've seen it so many times, and somebody took a shot of Olave, Wilson, Marvin Harrison, Ibuka, Fleming, and there might have been somebody else there. Obviously, they were only 1 year removed from Jamison Williams at that point, but all those guys sitting next to each other on the bench and just speculating, shoot, we got 2 first rounders. We're going to have 2 more first rounders, and then you throw Ibuka in the mix, and Fleming's the only guy that has a little bit to prove here, but certainly he was the number one receiver coming out of high school as well. So it's a pretty awesome sight.
Yeah, the pedigree that they've built there is nothing short of amazing, obviously, and I think that you got to be excited. I know his question is about who's proven, who's going to come up, and obviously Ibuka is sitting out this spring due to injury. So is Julian Fleming. So that's a good and a bad thing. A bad thing is it kind of suspends their growth and improvement, at least until the summer when they can be full go and get back out there. And we don't know if maybe they had minor surgical procedures or what the drawbacks are on them. But Marvin Harrison is certainly out there working every day and getting better and setting the tone, being the first one in, the last one to leave, and say, you want to be an NFL player. This is how it's done. Beyond those three, which I think those will continue to be your top three, you've also got Jaden Ballard, who I think is a tremendously promising player, and now in his third year at Ohio State, going into his third year. And I think he's a guy that you got to keep an eye out for, and a guy that is really going to challenge, I think, for playing time. Xavier Johnson, I think we saw was a game breaker, and he's coming back as a fifth or sixth year guy because of COVID. So don't forget about number 10. I mean, he had a long touchdown against Georgia. I mean, if you do it against Georgia in the biggest game of the year, the biggest game of everybody's life, other than the Michigan game, which we know is the single biggest game of everyone's life, but in the biggest game of your life, the national semifinal game, you can do it against anybody. So don't forget about Xavier Johnson. So I would disagree with your question marks there. I think Fleming and Johnson are very good players and are going to have a great year for the Buckeyes. You got those 4 second-year players who the jury is out on, and we are just now, they've had 2 practices, maybe 3 practices in helmets and jerseys against air, basically. So you don't know. I can't make a value judgment on any of those second-year players yet. Caleb Burton, Caleb Brown. I think Caleb Burton may have gotten injured in the first practice, not sure how serious. Kyon Grays and Kojo Antwi, it was been a non-contact injury for Burton. Those 4 guys, they're on the clock because the guys coming up behind them, Bryson Rogers, Noah Rogers, Carnell Tate, and Brandon Ennis are, I think 2 or 3 of them are in camp right now. I know Tate is there. One of the Rogers is there. Ennis might be there, and the other Rogers is coming in later, I think. So you need to see. I mean, that's 7 guys in their first or second year. You don't think out of that group of 7 guys, probably 4 of which were national top 100 players, that you're not going to find one good playmaker that's going to make inroads this year. I would disagree with that assertion. I would think that somebody out of that group, and moreover, if there's a failing of Brian Hartline, it's to play the depth. You've got to get those younger guys in the game early and often and build the depth, because you don't want Harrison or Fleming or Ibuka or Johnson to go down with injuries because they had to play 65 plays a game. So to me, that's an area to me where you really want to see them play the depth, and I think that to me is exciting.
We'll introduce Kevin here in just a second. I got one more thing to add to our previous conversation about there's a lot of talk in the chat about Ohio State's prowess in the NFL draft not converting to the number of championships, national championships that some people might expect. We were having a conversation yesterday, and somebody was trying to convince me that the TCU and Baylor teams of 2014, because of course they were left out of the playoff, and I thought that everybody earned a playoff spot, but we just didn't have an expanded 8-team playoff or a 16 playoff to accommodate those teams. But I was trying to make the point that there, in no way are you comparing those TCU and Baylor teams to Ohio State. So I look up the NFL draft selections off the 2014 Baylor team compared to the 2014 Ohio State roster. If you play it out the next 4 NFL drafts, 31-8 Ohio State NFL draft selections off that roster versus 8 for Baylor. So no comparison there. Kevin, how you doing today?
Doing great. Got a little jammed up with another show, and I'm like, I gotta go. And here I am for the final 17 minutes or whatever. So we'll try and make them count.
Absolutely. Catch Kevin's work, Big Me Kickoff Podcast, Buckeye Huddle, of course. What do you have lined up in those two categories for this week, Kevin?
Well, over at Buckeye Huddle, I've been just going through and listening to interviews with the linebackers, recently push pieces with CJ Hicks and Reed Carrico, and just how they're trying to battle and find playing time in a room that seems to be kind of dominated with Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers and Cody Simon kind of being the third guy. And then as for the Big Me Kickoff, we have been in a little bit of hiatus, but looking to try and get a show probably on Monday as we get out of the NC2A tournament, first weekend, kind of look at how things are going there. Maybe talk about some of the Chris Holtmann Notre Dame rumors. Hoops Weiss seems to think that Holtmann is a viable candidate there. Chris Holtmann is saying that he's not, but we'll kind of delve into all of that here in the coming days.
Well, Kevin, right out of the gate, I'm going to put you on the spot because I'm curious as to whether you have any thought on Brandon Hillman, who was a top 200 player out of high school, out of Virginia, top 5 player in the state, 9th or 7th rated athlete, depending on your service. He had a national letter of intent at Notre Dame, was in their 2023 class at 6'1", 190, and was taken out of and given permission out of his letter of intent due to personal reasons. And Ohio State seems to be in the mix. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, Ohio State is in the mix. He's supposed to be lining up some sort of visit to Ohio State, but according to some people I'm talking to, I don't know what that was, on the ground out there, Ohio State's going to have some ground to make up, and not only ground to make up against another team, but it happens to be their biggest rival. It sounds like Michigan has made an impression there. That's not to say that the gap is insurmountable, but you got to get him on campus and kind of see what happens. He's listed as an athlete. I mean, being recruited in the defensive backfield, though. Until the visit happens, if a visit happens, which I believe it will, it's game on at that point. But right now, where things stand, I would probably say that Michigan is in the best position to land him, but things change all the time.
Yeah, Portsmouth, Virginia athlete, Notre Dame signee in December, and was granted a release for whatever reason. And USC, Ohio State, LSU, Michigan, Virginia, Boston College, Vanderbilt, Virginia Tech, Louisville have all offered him. He played quarterback and defensive back in high school. So, I don't know where that puts him, what position he's really looking at to play at the college level. But, Ohio State's making their bid, it sounds like. And like Kevin said, if they can get him on campus for a spring practice or the spring game, that would be huge. So, they're going to make their bid and let the chips fall where they may. I want to go back a second ago to the comment about they don't have a guy to take the top off the defense. And I would disagree with that. I think that, they've got game breakers at wide receiver. I think Ibuka certainly is a guy that can do that at times. And they had long touchdown passes against Michigan and Georgia, not 70, 80-yard type plays, but, they did have some 40-yard touchdowns in those games, as I recall. So, they're from Jay Baggs. I don't know if that's Jaden Ballard's long-lost third uncle, but, I'm not of a mind. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. I think that they've got guys that can beat people deep if need be, and do they? I mean, it's a quick strike offense. I mean, they score touchdowns, and once they get the defense loosened up, Kevin, we see a lot of times in these games they'll drive 10 plays, 75 yards on the first series. But once they get that defense loosened up, it's 4 plays, 75 yards, 3 plays, 75 yards. I mean, it can happen pretty quickly. So, but I know those nut cruncher games are a little bit different. But yeah, I don't. What do you think, Kev? I think they've got the firepower to go up against anybody they play against, and I'd like to see an increased role for Ballard. I'm not poo-pooing his whatever, but before you came on, I made the point that the one failing Brian Hartline had was he didn't play enough receivers, I thought, this past year to keep those guys from getting banged up.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly have guys that can take the top off. And the thing too is, I mean, all right, there's one thing about a guy that's going to be able to go out and get separation in a highly contested situation. But Ohio State, if you look at a lot of times, things are schemed up so well and routes are run so well that the separation is created before the defensive back ever even has a chance to have a shot. Guys are cutting and making, just wide open, runs 4 or 5 yards away from the closest defender. So I don't think Ohio State necessarily needs to be able to go out there and say, well, we're just going to go run the 9. We're just going to run a vertical pattern like that and go and to win that way. Now it's great to have as an option, Devin Smith, who was able to do that, but let's not forget with Devin Smith, he would make the impossible look easy, but a lot of times he'd make the easy look impossible. He had problems with a lot of the little shorties and as you would sit there and say in basketball, the bunnies out there. He wasn't so good at those, but the ball skills that he had and everything else were fantastic, and he was great on the 9. But there certainly are going to be guys that are going to be able to do that. You don't necessarily need to have a Jameson Williams all the time in terms of being that burner to get things done. So, I think that Jaden Ballard certainly is somebody that gives them a lot of that option. And I think that we're going to see a case with no more JSN in the system. I mean, Olave and Wilson gone the year before. I mean, obviously you got Marv, obviously you got Emeka, obviously you've got Julian, but I think we're going to see more of a rotation. And I really think that the class of incoming freshmen, more than anything, are going to force that as well too, because how do you not play a Carnell Tate or a Brandon Ennis or either of the Rogers guys?
Got Kevin Noon. We got Steve Hellwagon for the next few minutes. Leave those comments and questions here at Buckeyes Live. We're here every Wednesday, typically at 11 a.m. Eastern time, but schedules sometimes cause us to move around. So please hit that bell for the notifications to know when we go live. All right. This one comes up from time to time. Of course, when you have a great and illustrious football history, which includes the best winning percentage of all time, which I think is the best indicator of a program's staying power and its elite status over history, more so than people voting for national championships for most of the history of college football. But maybe it just feels that way being a Buckeyes fan, that there is an inordinate amount of near misses throughout the history of the program. Steve, technically, we are in the window, as was mentioned when you were running through the national championships during our lifetime and us being the same age. Technically, we snuck 3 in there, one being in 1968 there. So we snuck the first one in there.
I was born in February of 68, and they won it, obviously on January the 1st of 1969. So, yeah, I guess I do have 3 in my lifetime. So, yeah, I guess correct me on that. But you get the gist of what I'm saying. It's so infrequent. Sure. And here's the thing. When you get to the tip of the spear, when you get to the rarefied air, as Urban used to say, as he was sending him out to play Michigan, the air on the other side of that door is rare. The Ohio State teams that beat Michigan, those are the special teams. And the Ohio State teams that win national championships are even 3 times more special than that, when you think about it, because it's just, it is such a difficult task to have everything fall in line. In 2014, they were, the dreaded team of destiny. In 2002, they were the underdog. the team of destiny. In 06, they were the front runner. They were number one wire to wire. 98, they were number one for a good part of the season, almost wire to wire till they lost to Michigan State. Under the current format, they would have still made the Final Four, in 1998. And probably won it, because I don't think Tennessee or Florida State that year were worth a crap at all. So, I think that there have been so many close calls and so many tough finishes for this team. We bring back the Clemson loss in 2019. Well, you didn't want to win that game anyway, because Joe Burrow was going to put up a 40-50 spot against you, and he was going to win that one regardless of who showed up. The Chicago Bears could have showed up, and he was going to win that one. So, it didn't matter. You look at what they did. They probably had the single greatest season any team's ever had in college football history. They beat like 8 or 9 ranked teams and like 5, 6, 7 top 10 teams along the way. It was just nuts what they accomplished, and his individual exploits that year. I always say it's like Thad Matta losing to Kansas in the semifinals. I joked with him 3 months later, you didn't want to play Anthony Davis and that team, Kentucky, in the championship game anyway, because Kentucky went in and smoked Kansas regardless. So again, so we can say, oh yeah, 19 was a near miss. Well, they weren't the best team in college football in 19. They were a really good team, but they weren't the best team. So, have they had the best team the last 2 years, 3 years? No, not with that defense. No. So certainly not in 20, when they got beat by 4 touchdowns by Alabama or whatever it was. So, or 2021, whatever year it was. So they all run together.
Kevin, I think I can speak
the best team doesn't always win. I mean, and that's the thing. Yeah. And I think that, you bring up the Joe Burrow year at LSU. I mean, you get into a 60-59 game, and you don't know what's going to happen.
Anything can happen. Yeah.
I was going to say LSU's weakest point was that its secondary wasn't great. For people trying to classify it as like the greatest football team of all time, there were some warts on that defense. I mean, and I understand that they had, some solid defensive backs, but as secondary play was not akin to what the offense was doing there. But you're only going to have one national champion each year, and that is what it is. And certainly Ohio State, when it won its title over Miami, who was the better team at that point? It was Miami. I mean, in terms of what you see on paper and everything else, but Ohio State was the better team that game, had the better game plan, and executed a hell of a lot better than Miami.
More physical. Yeah.
So, yeah, you could go through all of these years like J-Bags has and have these, but only one team is going to come out at the end. And, whatever, we're up to 131 Division 1A teams at this point, 130 teams are not going to get there. But Ohio State certainly has had a history of being unlucky in some of the, in the biggest situations. But, we look at 06 and 07. I mean, Ohio State pretty much left everything on the field against Michigan, goes to play Florida, and what's, really thought of it in the moment as an afterthought, and gets whacked. You sit there and you go to the 07 game against LSU, playing LSU in its own backyard. I still wonder what the outcome of the game is if Brian Robisky makes that early touchdown catch. That ends up being a 14-point swing or whatever it is, and Ohio State ends up getting away from a run game that was working very well, because when you fall behind multiple scores, you have to sit there and make adjustments. But Ohio State certainly has had a lot of opportunities to prove that it's the best team and should be the last team standing, only to have something go awry.
Even though it looks on the scoreboard like LSU blew out Clemson, and that was the final outcome, 42-25, that was a 28-25 game in the fourth quarter. So, and I don't think Clemson was better than Ohio State. But anyway, yes, Steve, to your point, LSU was the best team in the country that year. To Kevin's point, they may not have been the best team had they played Ohio State for the national championship. We'll never know, of course, who would have won the game. But, if we take any elite program, even Saban winning all those national championships, if we take Alabama all the way back through the rest of our lifetime, you're going to have a list of years where you could say, man, they could have won in 13. They could have won in 18. They could have, list the Alabama years where they were oh so close, 21. You can do that with any team. It just seems to be a little inordinate, and maybe that's just my scarlet and gray, and just these, when you look at some of these years, I think I can speak for Ohio State fans because I am one, that some of these years, looking at these years, still bring me, shudders. Still makes me cringe. So yes, but we cannot rewrite history. We can talk about it, and it's fun to speculate of what might have been, what could have been, had officials made different decisions, and Justin Fields and Chris Olave been on the same page, breaking off a route. All those things are interesting to speculate, but they are what they are at this point. Kickers making 50-yard field goals. That's a lot to ask, but it can be done. All right. We got Kevin here. We got Steve here each and every week, typically Tony Gerdeman. Steve, what do you have going on this week?
It's going to be kind of a busy weekend. I'm going to go to help out maybe a little bit at Nationwide with some of our other 24/7 sites. Michigan State's there, and maybe I'll pitch in and help them out with NCAA coverage. And then it's spring break at Ohio State this week, so there is no spring practice for these 5 or 6 days, but they'll be back on the field next Tuesday. Everybody will come back from spring break, and they'll start right in. I think there's a scrimmage a week from Saturday, the following Saturday, where a lot of things are going to be, discussed and determined, I think, at that point. So we'll do our best to cover all of those developments next week in terms of football. Women's basketball, we talked about. If you're an Ohio State fan and want to get out of the house this weekend, they play James Madison, I think 1:30 on Saturday at Value City Arena. And then they would play the winner of the game between North Carolina or Purdue St. John's winner. They're in a first 4 game on Thursday. That would be on some point on Monday. They haven't determined the time on that. And that'll be one heck of a game to try and get Ohio State out to the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. And we don't know what time. So I'm going to try and get to that. And Saturday and Sunday, there's also Ohio high school state basketball down in University of Dayton. They're hosting, imagine the week they're having down there. They hosted the girls state Final Four last weekend for 3 days. Then 2 or 3 days worth of first 4 coverage here, with the games last night and tonight at the University of Dayton. Convert it back for state basketball this weekend, which has a switch. It is being contested Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and they do that so that kids don't have to take a day off school on the Thursday to go to the state championship. They only the teams that are playing on Friday are impacted because of that. And then the semifinals in 2 divisions Friday, 2 divisions Saturday, and then 4 state championship games. They're all on Spectrum Sports here in Ohio on Sunday. And the Division I semifinals on Saturday evening will also be on Spectrum Sports. And one of the Ohio State signees, Devin Royal from Pick Central, he'll be there. Some other key prospects as well. So a busy weekend of basketball, 3 different arenas. I'm going to try and hit them all. And then back to spring football coverage next week. Kevin, the Pro Day is next Wednesday. I know you and I will probably be out there. Mickey Marotti will have us stuck over by the garage door in the corner trying to watch the deep routes 80 yards away and the 40-yard times 120 yards away. But, we'll do our best to provide coverage of the Pro Day. I'm sure they'll have NFL Network and ESPN right down there in the huddle, watching as C.J. Stroud tells Marvin Harrison he wants him to run a hitch, so we can show off for the NFL scouts. But the local media gets crapped on as usual over in the corner. Piss on you people. Go piss on the wall over in the corner if you would.
Yeah, speaking of the state tournament, I'm actually doing a freelance gig for Spectrum Sports. I will be in their Columbus studios assisting with some of the highlight gathering of that. So I will get to watch all of those games as I did the same with the girls tournament this last week. And Steve hit the nail on the head about Pro Day. We will be in a corner somewhere with our phones trying to time the 40-yard dashes from the worst angle possible, whatever. And we'll either have guys running 3.9s or 8.7s because we will not have any sort of clear angle, but we will get
Has he started yet? Did he start?
We'll get some. We will get some access to the athletes who do go through Ohio State's Pro Day workout at the end of the event, and maybe even get to bump into a couple of NFL people. But a lot of times they're not necessarily looking to do interviews at that point.
It's kind of cool. I think one year Hoodie was there and he was putting Sam Hubbard through some one-on-ones, some drill work down there in the corner. And man, how cool is that to see the greatest coach in the history of the NFL down there working with the Ohio State athletes and trying to get a feel for, how they can move and bend and make plays and these kind of things. And, that's the kind of, you'll have Ryan Day will be out there, with all of his NFL compadres out there, directing traffic and holding court. This is what makes this guy special. And, I think CJ Stroud's going to go real high. I don't know exactly what that means, but I think he's going to go real high, possibly number one. Who traded up to number one?
Carolina.
Do they need a number one quarterback? Obviously,
they do. That's why they moved up.
Baker and whoever else. So,
Well, Baker just signed with he'd gone somewhere else, and now he's with he went to the Rams, and now he's just signed a deal with Tampa Bay.
Yeah, there he goes.
Sam Darnold did not work out as well.
What a come down from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield, although I don't know that Baker's going there to be the starter, but he's going to compete for it, I presume. So,
yeah, speaking of you guys in Spectrum, I was in a Rockneys this week having lunch with a few friends and looked up, and there was Mr. Hellwagon there.
Yeah.
Glorious 50-inch screen.
Breaking it down scientifically, I'm doing a segment with them about the NCAA tournament that'll air probably on Thursday. So there you go.
I told Mary Lee that I'm gunning for your job over there, Steve. I'm going to take it from you. She laughed. She's like, Steve has got me out of so many pinches. We have an interview guy back out, and Steve is always there. I'm like, I can't take that gig from my guy.
That's funny. Well, I do the best I can. What can I say?
Our guy Michael Campbell here is reminding me of a ridiculous, probably the most, and I've got a long list of ridiculous Twitter battles I've been in, but there was a gang of Notre Dame fans about a week ago trying to tell me that Notre Dame has had a better football program than Ohio State. And I said, well, if we're talking over the course of history, yes, we've got a great argument. But if we're talking, pick your time frame, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, it's not even close. And I ran down these numbers. I think I've got them locked and loaded. Since 2000, Ohio State's won 12 major bowl games. 12. Notre Dame, of course, has won 0. Ohio State has finished in the top 10 since 2000. 19 times. Notre Dame, 5. Ohio State's won 58 more games. And of course, they've actually played a few times, like 4 times in the last, 2, is it 5 times? Yeah, 5 times with the 95-96, the 2 Fiesta Bowls in last year's game. 5 times in the last close to 30 years. 5-game sweep.
What does he mean by having 2 years robbed of wins? What does that mean? Did they have some stuff redacted? Or
Brian Kelly, the 2011, 2012 teams, I believe those are the 2, or 12 and 13. Similar to Tressel. So there's your trade-off.
What did they do? I don't recall. And Kevin, you're not allowed to answer this question because I know what you're going to say, but
I didn't say it. It
starts with he. No. I guess I blocked that on my memory that Notre Dame had some sanctions of some sort. That seems out of place.
Anywhere that Lou Holtz goes, sanctions generally follow. So
that's going to be a great game, I think, and 2 really good teams. Is
Ohio
there
State's
last
on them? It's not even going to be close.
Yeah.
It's not even going to be close.
Ohio State quarterback
by 21.
That quarterback from Wake Forest gives him a shot to put some points on the board. Did Is
Who's
their
he
last?
throwing to?
Well, that's a good question.
He's going to send a throw to Lorenzo Styles Jr.
Low Styles Jr. I don't know. Is he still there? I mean, is he their only receiver? Or
Well, I mean, they got other receivers. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody I've heard of. They don't have Michael Mayer anymore.
no,
I
he's
mean,
gone.
it's no. This isn't going to be close. I mean, Ohio State played them last year. Certainly saw some things that were there. I think this Ohio State team having 3 games before the Notre Dame game. I mean, I understand Ohio State breaking in a new quarterback, breaking in 3/5 of a new offensive line. Will have gone on the road to play at Indiana,
Yep.
and then had 2
That
Ham
helps.
and Egger games to sit there and work out some of the rust. It's going to be 38-13 or something like that.
Oof. On NBC. Is their last major bowl win against Texas A&M in the Cotton Bowl in like 94, 95?
94, 93
Oh, good
season,
God.
94.
That's almost 30 years ago, Mark. What are we
It
doing?
sure is. Yeah.
30 years. This is like Indiana basketball. 30 years has slipped by and no one's noticed. Oh, and for the 26th consecutive year, what did not happen? Indiana did not win the Big Ten tournament championship. Purdue won it only for the second time. So the state that graced us, that built the sport, that invented the sport, between the two signature schools that have dominated Big Ten regular season play since 1900, they have 2 tournament championships and none for the Hoosiers. But Indiana to me is kind of a dark horse. I did my brackets. I've got Alabama and Kansas on both of my brackets making the Final Four, and then I have 2 on one and 2 on the other. I have Duke on one, and Purdue maybe as the other team, and then on the other bracket I have Texas and Xavier or something like that. So, or vice versa, something. I have Xavier's making a run for some reason. I don't know.
I haven't even done my bracket yet. I'll probably get it done. Sorry, as I move my computer. Probably get it done some point this afternoon finally, and I'm just doing one because I have a hard enough time keeping up with one.
Folks, we appreciate you being here. And again, it's typically on Wednesday, but lock it in with the sub to the channel. Follow Steve at Bucknuts247 Sports, Kevin, Buckeye Huddle, and the next Big Me podcast. The suspense is killing all of us of when that's going to be released. But we should be back here next week at some point, and we will talk to all of you then. All right, Steve, Kevin, thank you.
Take care.
Absolutely.